Imagine being able to emulate the mixdown of your favorite house and techno tracks every time without fail. Would that change your production game? In today's video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that using an objective step-by-step framework to create mixes that match the power of Afterlife, Defected, Drum Code, or whatever style you're going after. One of my students recently came to me with his project. He's been producing for over 8 years and he still couldn't get it to sound full. Once I taught him this framework, his tracks now rival his favorite artists. I call this framework the mixing hierarchy of house and techno, and this is part 2 of a part 5 series. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, stop, go watch that now, or this won't make sense. Links below. But today, we're diving into low end, picking the right kick, creating a bass line, processing it, and referencing it against Pro Trap. This is everything you need to create a thunderous low end that gets signed and supported by international DJs. Let's get into it. It's a very quick overview of the hierarchy we're looking at today. We've got kick, sub bass, and bass line. The kick is always going to be the most dominant element in the low bus. Then the sub bass has the second most dominance, and then the bass line has the third most dominance. So what this means is like nothing should interfere with the kick, nothing should interfere with the sub bass other than the kick, and then the bass line can be modified to fit around the kick and the sub bass. This is all then routed into a low bus, which will do some processing, which then is pushed into the master, and it's just the whole process we're going to show today.
All right, awesome. Let's get into it. So this is my template here. It has everything, all the hierarchy already built. So if you want to actually get this at the end of the lesson, link in the description. You can download it completely for free. However, I am going to delete everything here and do it from scratch so we don't miss anything, because it's easy just to say, well, it's already set up. That's how you do it. It's like, that's not helpful. So we're going to delete everything. We're going to start again. First thing we're going to do is going to add 3 MIDI tracks. I'm going to keep the reference rack at the top there because we'll need that later. But I'm going to put in kick, sub, and bass. I also like to color these red, light orange, and darker orange. Next thing I'm going to do is come to the kick. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in here, make a MIDI clip, and just make some quarter notes for the kick. Right now it sounds like Serum because there's a Serum on there. Just going to come grab a simpler, put it in one-shot mode. Next thing I'm going to do is come to Splice. I'm going to type in the genre of music I want to work in today. So that's going to be melodic techno. Whatever you're working in is what you would type in. So I'm going to select melodic techno here. I'm going to type in kick, and then I'm going to find a kick drum. By that one, I'm going to drag this kick into the simpler. I'm going to put it in one-shot mode, and then I'm going to open up the oscilloscope on the master and just have a look at the overall length of the kick. You can see here, we just got around an 8th note. I'm just going to make it a little bit shorter like this, and then turn the fade out up a little bit. Just to give it a little bit of a tail, like so. The next thing I want to do is look at the peak level of the kick. I'm trying to get it to -8, or as close to -8 as I can. -11, so go a bit louder. Put it to -6 for now. That gives us 8.8, and then if I just bump this up by 0.8, maybe a little bit more. There we go. Now the kick is hitting -8, which is where we want to be, and we don't want to do any processing. That's it. A good kick sample is a good kick sample. Don't fuck with it. Just shorten the length if you need to. That's about it. Set to -8 for now. The next thing we're going to do is create our sub bass, which is going to be our second most dominant element in the lows group. Let's start with like F1 here. I'm just going to create some quarter notes like so, and then I'm going to load up Serum 2 to go on top of it. Now, if you don't have Serum 2, it's completely fine. You can use anything that can generate a pure sine wave that you can change the phase of. For example, Ableton's Operator does a great job of this. I'm going to come here, select sine wave. I'm just going to quickly listen to it, soloed. I'm going to open up span here. As you can see here, this is not quite sub, this is more bass. So I'm going to drop it down an octave. There we go. Next thing we want to do is we don't want to use the mono button here. There's this really weird thing that if you use the mono button, it removes the click, but it doesn't actually reset the phase per note like it should. You can look at the oscilloscope to prove this. You can see here, like the phase is shifting slightly to the right every note. We don't want this. We want the phase to be consistent. So we're going to take the mono off. But then we get this little bump here, which we don't want as well. So we fix this by using the attack and release. So I'm just going to move Serum over here and the oscilloscope over here and just slightly tweak it until that bump goes away. So louder so I can see what's going on. Go. So I'm just trying to level out these oscillations. So obviously that's like way too much, because if the release is too high, what's happening is the previous note is blending into the next note and it's creating a volume spike. We don't want this. Obviously, if the release is also too low, it will create a click. Don't want either. You can also play with the attack. There we go. Perfect. We don't need to do anything else here because it's just a single tone. We don't need to EQ it. We don't need to filter it. That's it. But one thing we do need to do is start playing with the phase to match it with the kick. So what I'm going to do here real quick is I'm just going to make a macro here. I'm going to go to the config, select the phase control, and I'm going to go to map, put that to macro 1. Bada bing, bada boom. We're not going to use it just yet. The next thing I'm going to do is going to grab a sidechain. I like using Shaperbox here, and I'm going to set the sidechain input to kick. However, because we want to use a MIDI input, I'm going to have to come back to the kick drum here. I'm going to have to put it into a group, and I'm going to have to create a new chain. And then I'm going to have to grab something in Ableton called an external instrument and drag this on here. I'm going to call this sub, and I might as well give it the same color so we know where it's going. And then the MIDI 2, we're going to change this to sub, and then the shaper box. Done. Now what will happen is this shaper box, if we go into the shaper box now and pick volume, change the setting to quarter notes and change it to MIDI input. You can see here, we can see the kick drum. The first thing we want to do is actually turn off the anti-click trigger smoothing because it's going to change stuff that we're going to do it in such a way that we don't want any additional processing that might mess up any, like add any latency or anything like that. So I'm just going to turn that off. The first thing we're going to do is leave this white dot at the top left. That's great. I'm going to create another one and bring it all the way down. And then you kind of want to just drag 1 pixel to the right. So you're not having a binary 1 to 0 because that will cause a click as well. So this way we're just creating like almost an instant curve. And then we just want to shape it around the visual of the kick here. So maybe I go like 2 oscillations back. And then I have this end where the kick actually ends. And then maybe I curve it in like so. So if I open up now the oscilloscope on the master, turn the show sidechain button on so I can see the kick in orange, even though it's not playing. I can see here the kick and the sub bass, and there's like a little crossover point where like the oscillations are starting to cross over. This is where the sub phase control is going to come in. So I can start moving this knob, and I can start moving the phase slightly and get it to match as good as I can. You can see here, like these oscillations don't quite line up. They're slightly in a different key. So what you would do here is you would either shift your kick, maybe 1 or 2 semitones up or down, or you can shift your sub bass 1 or 2 semitones up or down. If you're at the beginning of your project, this is going to give you more flexibility. But if you're doing this in a project you're already working on, yes, this is going to be obvious. This is obviously going to cause problems because you don't want to change the key of your whole track. But let's just drop this down to like E and see if that makes it better. Again, we're going to come here and change the phase. I think maybe we're pretty close, but maybe let's try dropping it 1 more key. Dropping it 1 more pitch, I mean. There we go. And so now this is like phase aligned with the kick and the sub. So now if I take the show sidechain button off and we go back and we just listen to the kick and sub together, what you should see here is play the kick by itself and then add the sub bass. And we should see no transformation in the kick shape. The kick should have complete dominance here. For example, if the sidechain is set up incorrectly, we'll see huge change in the kick shape. Now the kick's all mangled and weird, right? It has like weird volume spikes where this is loud, this is quiet. It's completely mangled. So what's happening here is the kick doesn't have dominance over the sub. The sub has dominance over the kick. We don't want that. So we're just going to put the sidechain back on. This is how it should look. With the sub out and the sub in, there's like almost no change. Another thing we might have to do as well is down here on the track delays, if you don't have that available, just click down here and click track options. And it might be good as well just to pull this back like 2 milliseconds. Right now it seems fine, but in some cases, the sub oscillations will blend into the kick and cause the transient to spike. But it looks like we're okay for now. Totally fine. So the kick is not being altered at all. The sub bass is out the way of it completely. All right, and that's literally all we have to do then for sub bass. We don't need to EQ it, compress it, saturate it, nothing. We just want a pure sine wave with a sidechain on. That's where we're gonna leave it. Just make sure it's phase aligned to the kick. The only other thing we have to do here is change the volume. We're gonna try and hit -16 as a starting point. We go. So the kick set to -8. And the sub set to -16. Perfect. Next thing we're going to do is go to the baseline. Maybe we go for like a rolling baseline, like so. I'm also going to add like some velocity into this, so it's like gets more of a groove going. So using the ramp function, I'm just going to do that. So it's already going to sound pretty messy. The problem for this is the release is too high, so let's just bring this down. It's more of like a pluck. I'm going to open up span and look at like kind of where this is starting. Too high right now. We kind of want to match it for this where the sub is, so it should be -2. The one thing we want to be really careful about here is making sure that the fundamental of the bass is not interfering with the sine wave of the sub. So if we slow the sub, we can see that it's here at like 45 hertz or so, and the bass line is here. In some cases though, if the bass line is another octave lower, like here, will have this interference with the sub. Now you can EQ that out, but it's not as clean. So what you want to do is, if in the case where the bassline's fundamental is interfering with the sub's fundamental, you want to come to the editor by clicking this pencil icon, come to all processes, and go to remove fundamental. It'll create that space there for the sub. However, in this situation, because we're in D sharp, it's actually better to have this up an octave. So we don't need to remove the fundamentals. So I'm just going to reset this back to where it was. And then we can see this is actually still separated. So the sub has a tone here at 45, and the bass has a tone here. And the bass's fundamental starts around 80, which is an octave up. Next thing we're going to do is just create a filter, bring this down to maybe like 90 hertz or something. And we're just going to put our envelope on it. Stick a second envelope on. I don't want to go too much into sound design. I'm just going to use a really simple sound today just for the demonstration, but obviously this is where you pick your favorite sounds and so on. Next, I want to go into the processing of bass. And again, I don't want to go too much into post-processing either, but we're going to go as like saturation into compression, then into EQ, then into limiting, then into sidechaining. And there might be other creative effects you might put in between there, like before the limiter. So we're just going to do some basic processing. Start with some saturation from Decapitator. So I'm just going to do some compression. So I'm going to open the oscilloscope with the master and see what's going on. And I have noticed something that we've actually forgotten. So you can see here, these oscillations are moving around quite a lot. We actually want to go here and just turn this random all the way to 0 back on the synth, just so we're having it reset the phase every time. There we go, much more controlled. So the first thing we want to do is we want to have a look at the overall shape. And what I want to do with compression is you sort of want to make these quieter parts closer to this louder part, right? So we can do that quite easily just using a bit of compression here. Aim for about 3 decibels of gain reduction. Don't want to go too high. So I'm actually going to bring the threshold back here. And then the last thing we want to do is just make sure we gain matching. So we can see here, this is the input and the output. About 1 decibel difference. So I'm just going to boost it up by 1 dB. Maybe like 1.1. You can just turn the compressor on and off. So what I've done here is just made the top part and the bottom part a little bit closer together, just a bit more rounded. Awesome, so that's compression. Again, I don't want to spend too much time going into it. And then we're going to go to EQ. So with Q4 and Q3, you actually have a thing called spectral grab here, which is going to be super quick to find resonant peaks. Now, this is such a simple sound that there isn't probably going to be many problems, but let's give it a go anyway. One thing I like to do with spectral grab is grab the point that it suggests and just boost it until you kind of hear what it sounds like boosted. And I'm just going to bring it back down to 0 and hear if it's still a problem. So yeah, I can still hear that wooing sound even at 0, so I'm just going to reduce it a little bit. I'm going to grab another peak. That one doesn't really bother me, so I'll just leave that there. I think that's all the EQ you need to do there, leave that one tone out. Awesome. The next part, and this is probably going to be the most complicated part, so pay attention, is going to be the side chaining. One thing we need to do beforehand is come back to the kick channel. We're actually going to duplicate this one that says sub. We're going to call this bass. I'm going to give this an orange color so it matches the color of the channel. I'm going to change this to bass and then change this to shaper box. And then back on the bass line, we can come here, click volume, go MIDI, change it to quarter, and we're going to start doing our sidechain. Make sure that anti-click smoothing is turned off. Yeah, so this is now set up, ready for us. But the first thing we're actually going to do is we're going to duplicate this shaper box. We're going to come to our kick and we're going to put this on. You might be wondering, why are we putting a shaper box on the kick? Don't worry, this is the process. This is how you're going to get perfect multi-band sidechain for your bass. So you're going to come in here, we're going to hit this headphone icon. I'm going to create 3 bands. I'm just going to solo the kick and we're just going to create some bands that separate the lows, the mids, and the highs. I also like to change this to 24 dB slopes just so we're making it more isolated. I'm going to select the middle band and I'm going to drag this like lower thing up until all of the bass disappears from the kick. You can actually use the oscilloscope on the master here to kind of see what's going on as well. So around there, maybe like 200 hertz, we've just got now like a punch and we've got rid of all the bass. If I select the lower part of the band, you can hear we just isolated the sub. There's the top part. There's the middle part, and then the top part, we just want to bring this up or down until we just got the click. Maybe around there like 2K. So lows, mids, highs. Very cool. So the next thing we want to do now is just copy the shaper box back onto the bass. We're actually going to delete the old one. And this way we have the exact same settings. We also need to come back to our kick channel and this external instrument, we need to redo it again and go to bass and then go to shaper box to make sure the input's working. Come back to here, make sure that MIDI input is turned on, and then we're going to make sure the anti-click smoothing is turned off, which it is. So this part's going to be complicated. There's going to be 3 shaper boxes up on the screen at once. The first one is going to be the kick shaper box, we put over here. The next one is going to be the bassline shaper box, which we're putting here. And the third one is going to be the master oscilloscope, which I'm going to put over here in the top right. So the first thing we want to do is actually select the low bands, both of these shaper boxes. And now we can actually see that we're just side chaining to the lows of the kick. Like so. I'm going to solo my bassline here as well. And I kind of want to then just, like we did with the sub, we're just going to start curving around the shape that we see. So, and we can always put the show sidechain button here on the master, on the oscilloscope. See where the crossover is happening. We also bring the kick in. And much like with the sub, we should see absolutely no change in the kick. So we can turn the kick, we can turn the bass on and off. So we're just listening to the kick, seeing the shape of it, and then seeing what the shape of it looks like with the bass line in. So the only part that's getting changed a little bit is this very end of the tail, which is absolutely fine. But the overall kick shape is fine. Next, we're going to go to the middle band and just do the same thing again, rinse and repeat. You see here then, this change in the kick. So we need to build a sidechain around this. You can see here, it's a much smaller shape. And then here we go. So if we look now at the kick here, we see no modification in it. It has complete dominance over the bass line. Maybe a tiny bit there, but it's not a big deal. And then finally, we're going to do the top part of it, which is the click. There's almost no problem here, but I'm just going to add it for taste. Super quick click, 1 pixel to the right. So do something like that. Well, something like this. And that's it. Now we take this headphones icon off and we can see kind of what's going on overall. So as we can see here, there's a little bit of modification happening here. There's a little bit of summing happening. Let's fix that. Again, this really isn't a problem. You could probably leave it at this point and be like, that's absolutely fine. But for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to show you how to just basically curve this off. I bet this is coming from the mid group, so I'm just going to take the freeze off and we're just going to see if we can get rid of that. there we go. We've got rid of all the little spikes in it and that volume spike there. So this kick is now really clean. I'm gonna bring the sub back in. And what we should see here is there's absolutely nothing interfering with the kick. So we look at, going back to the start of the video with the hierarchy, we should have kick drum that has complete dominance, sub bass that has dominance over everything but the kick, and then bass line that should get out the way of the sub and the kick. So the kick looks like naked. With the sub, no change. With the bass line, no change. And then we can see on span as well that the bass line and the sub bass, they're in different regions, they don't interfere with each other. So now everything is sort of halved around each other perfectly. And then with the bass line, we want to hit this around -14. So you can see here it's a little bit loud for now, so I'm just going to turn it down. And it's just a starting point. It's not that -14, it just is the magic number. We're going to go into a bit later how to actually mix this to the nth degree. So now what we're going to do is we're going to group all of this. We're going to call it our lows group. So this is now we're creating the actual architecture and gluing this together. I'm going to grab a rack from my template and explain how it works. Made up of a compressor, a Pultec EQ, and a limiter. That's it. Let's start with the compressor. Super simple settings, really. The first thing that's important to know is on the C2 compressor, it allows you to put like an EQ on it. Now this EQ is not cutting away 50 hertz and below, but what it's doing is telling the compressor, hey, ignore these frequencies. Because the sub part of the kick is so loud, it's going to hit the threshold much earlier. So I just want to tell the compressor, hey, don't worry about the sub frequencies in the kick so much. Start targeting more where the body of the kick is. So again, it's not EQing, it's not taking any sound away. It's just telling the compressor where to target. And then when we do this compressor, I'm going to start with like a 2:1 ratio. I got it in bus style. The attack's 25, the release is 120. And I'm just going to pull the threshold till I get about 1 or 2 dBs of gain reduction. And we can have the oscilloscope open on the master here to help us. What we're doing here is we want the attack high enough that the kick's transient passes through on compressed. And then we want the release set where it's long enough that it will compress or glue the bass line to the kick, but it will also reset before the next kick, so we're not causing problems to the next kick. So when I bring the attack too low, you can see here that like the transient gets a bit quieter and the loudness of the kick comes here. We kind of want to redistribute this, so the loudest part of the kick is going to be near the start and it's going to curve into the bass line. That looks fine for now. Next thing we do is make sure we volume match it. So look at the input and the output, but it's pretty much bang on. So I'm just going to reduce this to 0.9. Sorry, it should have been plus, it should have been 1.1. A little bit of glue, makes it sound a little bit fatter. The next thing I'm going to do is put on this Pultec EQ. You can download these Pultec EQs anywhere. This one's a free one. I'm not really sure where I got it, but take a screenshot, find out where it's from. You can use this one or any other Pultec you can find. The first thing we need to do is find out where to target our CPS. CPS stands for cycles per second, so it's the same as hertz. A D sharp is what key we're in, so that's going to be around 39 hertz here. So I'm going to target, say, 45. Now I actually have a macro here on Ableton on the rack, so I'm just going to target 45 here. We're going to put this limiter on. We're going to set it to -6. It's important it's -6 for this way the architecture works, so just set to -6. And then we're going to boost into this ceiling until we have about 2 or 3 decibels of gain reduction. So around that, and then we're going to attenuate it until we get the least amount of gain reduction we can get, while still having some gain reduction. I kind of want the kick drum always hitting that limiter, so I know that it's super loud. So we have the compressor gluing it, we have the Pultec boosting the subs, and we have the limiter catching it. And then, if you remember from the previous video, I have a clipper here on the master that is pushing it by 6 decibels. And so what we get is actually a 0 dB master now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start balancing this against a reference track objectively. So now I've put this reference track in. It's an anima track from Afterlife. I'm not going to play it because I don't want to get copyright striked, but I will be filtering it and that should get around any issues. But if you don't know what the track is, it's called Voices in My Head by Anima, Argy, and Son of Sun. And then make sure that you set it up the same way I did in the previous video with repitch mode and matching the BPM. I'm actually going to turn on one of the filters on my master to only listen to the subs. And I'm going to open up my LUF meter on true level. If you don't have true level, you can get U-lean loudness meter. It's totally fine. And I'm going to push my hotkey here to turn the clipper off and go to the and solo the reference track and just look at what the LUFs are of the sub. So the subs in this track are around 10 LUFs, and we can also see the shape of the oscilloscope and kind of like where the relationship with the kick and the sub lie. So we're getting about a minus 10.1 LUFs for the sub specifically, and then we can also look at the oscilloscope and see all the kind of shape is going on here with the kick and the sub. And we can flick back to ours and see what's going on here too. Let's come back to our track then and look what the LUFs are here. So the first thing I noticed is that we're at 8.9, so we're about a 1.2 LUFs higher than the reference tracks. So let's actually start by pulling the subs down a little bit, because I saw on the oscilloscope that my subs peaking around here, where his subs are significantly quieter. So this makes our subs a little bit quieter too. Pull this down to like -5 maybe. Maybe a little bit more. I go to like -7. Make sure we reset the LUF. Make sure that we're resetting the LUFs every time. And we're getting close to that 10.1. I think another thing I'm seeing here on the reference track is like the kick peaks here and it rolls off immediately, while our kick is pretty much sausaged all the way. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come to the kick and I'm just going to roll off more of the kick like so, just so it's more in the same shape. Because before it has this huge body and huge tail, I just want to roll that tail off. So it's more like this maybe, matching the reference track. And now if we go back to the reference track again, and back to ours, we're getting closer to that 10.1, although we have gone a little bit too far now. So let's go and maybe put some more length back into the kick. Like so, and maybe we turn the sub up a little bit. Bring the sub down a little bit. So there we go. Now we're matching the reference track sub levels. Obviously, you don't have to get it like bang on the same number, but if you're within 1 LUF, you're probably in a good place. I'd also check like on the oscilloscope the shape of like kind of where the kick is sitting and where the sub bass is sitting, and kind of you can see the comparison level, right? And that's how you're going to be able to objectively be like, oh, okay, that's where the kick sits, that's where the sub sits, and then fix any issues. And you can see weird things because, like, for example, again, if you're looking at the oscilloscope here and the shaper box isn't turned on, you'll see like these weird spikes happening. If you see stuff like this, you know there's something going on with the sidechaining. Put the sidechaining back on, issue's fixed. And now we're going to go to the next band on the master. So on the master, I have the filter. I'm going to go to the next band here, which is going to be the bass. I'm going to list what's going on here. So we're getting about 13.2 LUF for the bass region. The kick's peaking around here, and the bass line is significantly quieter compared to the kick. Now let's look at ours. I'd say our kick is pretty much matched, although there's maybe a little bit louder. So I'm actually going to grab an EQ here on the kick drum. And while keeping the filter on the master, just get rid of this slope. While keeping the filter on the master and soloing the kick drum, I'm going to grab a bell EQ here, and I'm just going to keep the headphone icon on. I'm going to sweep across until I see the loudest part of the kick come through. There, I've gone too far. Out there. And I'm just going to turn this down by, like, say, 2 dB, like so. Maybe put the Q up a little bit more. Awesome. And now I'm just going to check what that looks like. Trying to match it's like here. There's like a little spike here, but I'm just trying to match it's like really where the top is here. A lot better. Then with the bass line, I can see in the reference track, the bass line's a lot louder. So I'm going to turn the bass line up here. Oh, just going to check the LUFs again of the reference track. About 13.2. So let's switch back to ours and see where we're at now. Close, we're about 0.5 out. I think what's probably missing is just a bit more sound design on the bass line. For example, we can hear on the reference track, the bass line's got like a lot of stereo in it, where we haven't got any stereo in our bass line currently. So this is something where I'd go back to the bass line and maybe add a layer that's going to add more width to the bass part of it. So we'll probably get that extra bit of volume, but I'm not going to do that for now. I just wanted to show you how you can identify the issues and fix them. That's about it then for how you would create the low end and then match it against the reference track. So let's turn the filters off and just hear what we've got made. I mean, that's a really nice low end to start with. And the beauty of it as well is that because the clipper is already boosting to 6, this is at 0 dB, you're now essentially working with a mastered track. And your low end is now built, it's ready, and you can start constructing your track on top of a mastered low end. So that's it for that video. That's the complete process I take from scratch to making a full-fledged club-ready low end. And then you can see here, we've even matched it against a reference track, so we know that it matches. We didn't have to turn the reference track down because we were pushing the clipper on the master up to match it, which removes any point of failure in terms of like volume matching. And now our low end is matching it in terms of like its kick, its sub, and its bass. It's like the sound, same LUFs, same overall shape. You don't have to be super anal about matching it perfectly. I was here just for demonstration purposes, but as long as you're within one LUF and you're sort of matching and identifying issues, like for example, we identified that the bass line wasn't wide and the reference track it was, maybe that's something we'd have to go back to our bass line at a width layer. But I hope you found this useful. Any questions, let me know in the comments or hit me up on Instagram, which I'll also link below. And then the next video, we're going to talk about drums and how we're going to anchor that to the lows group.